this will be 45 minutes. And then we'll be able to have a good discussion afterwards. I got some topics here that I know Gary Rouche is going to enjoy. So I hope Gary contributes a little later too. So I don't mean to bug you, Gary. This talk is a little bit of an offshoot of what I spoke about at the Association of Baha'i Studies in Atlanta last July. I wasn't in Atlanta, but I did it by Zoom. And that was a 20-minute talk. So I added another 25 minutes to this. And the first few slides, Darren Headley worked with me on them. And the rest are what I've done. So I'm going to talk a bit about sustainable development. I'm going to talk about a few different topics, and I'm not going to go into depth right now. So I'm just going to dabble in some of these topics to give you a better picture of ensuring food security while addressing environmental challenges. Down the road, I may give another talk with more details. So sustainable development is what we're really talking about. And I still like the United Nations that they came up with in 1987 with the Brundtland Report. Development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Sustainable agriculture definition. I like this one. It's by working with nature rather than against it. Farms avoid impacts that damage the environment without sacrificing productivity or profitability. By prioritizing science that addresses the interconnectedness of environmental, economic, and social factors, we create a truly sustainable agriculture system. So agriculture, oops, how do I get to that stuff at the top there? That'll be all right. I can more or less see it. Agriculture is the largest industry. Is Earth's largest industry. It employs 1 billion people, used to employ more. Hopefully it employs more in the future. Generates $1.3 trillion worth of food annually. Cropland and pasture occupy 50% of Earth's habitable land. Cropland and pasture provide habitat for a multitude of other species. Harmonizing perspectives among agriculture. I gotta somehow get rid of that stuff up there. Practices. The enkindled, this is from the Baha'i Universal Justice, December 30th, 2021 letter. The enkindled souls being raised up through the process of the plan are focused on transcending differences, harmonizing perspectives, and promoting the use of consultation for making decisions. Somehow, Don, I got to get rid of that.
It's fine.
Part across.
We're seeing it. Fine.
Yeah, but I can't see it.
Oh, you can't see it. Okay.
Yeah. Let me see here. Boom, boom, boom. I'll just have to run with it, I guess. I should be able to press something.
We can read
all that stuff across the top.
We can read.
I can't see the top. So anyways, harmonizing perspectives transcends differences. Most contemporary agriculture systems offer benefits for future agriculture systems and for environmental advantage. So indigenous knowledge systems often apply systems thinking. I'll get into that a little later. Organic farming eliminates pesticide and synthetic fertilizer use, supports healthy soil, has product sales of 3 times conventional and conventional price. Some tillage is still used, is seen as a negative, but maybe it won't be. Like conventional farming uses no tillage, but now we're saying maybe that should have a little bit of tillage. And the big problem with organic is it lacks a research funding. Such good systems, but the governments and of course the oligopolies, which I'll talk about later, aren't going to fund them. And so prices are 3 times conventional, but if more people went organic, they might not be quite so high, but they're still quite a bit. Permaculture and regenerative systems, agriculture systems increase plant biodiversity, minimize tillage, minimize pesticide and synthetic fertilizer use, supports healthy soil and reduces soil surface exposure. So again, I'm just touching on the surface here. I think someday one of us should come on and just give really good definitions of what permaculture, regenerative, organic is. Conventional annual cropping achieves minimal soil disturbance and applies, again, I can't see what I wrote there, applied pest management approach. We use pesticides only if absolutely necessary and applies synthetic fertilizer. As conventional farming is the most harmful to the environment, but it has the most job opportunities and it receives the most research funding. Agroforestry intercrops trees with crops, improves water quality, soil health, prevents weed germination due to shade, allows mixture of sun-loving and shade-loving crops. Crop diversity prevents crop disease even in high rainfall ecosystems. And I've just put this in here. I plead with people to try not to criticize farmers. Instead, try to get to know them and their circumstances. Most farmers are systems thinkers when allowed to think on their own. They are pawns in a big chess game being played by agriculture oligopolies. So integrating, oh man, can't see that.
Neil, I
Yeah,
can read the top line if you're having trouble.
sure.
Okay, top line says, therefore, harmonizing farming perspectives permits us to
That's
retain.
good. Participatory now.
Okay,
Retain aspects of all current agriculture systems to optimize future success. Not polarize one modality from the other, which is the Baha'i principle of unity and diversity, and realize that farmers are doing their best under current circumstances and conditions, biophysical conditions, socioeconomic, including injustice and the lack of important information. So if we retain all these systems going forward, one would think we'd have a better chance of success instead of sort of polarizing. Some key dimensions of sustainable food production: land, a finite amount of land in the world for agriculture. Suburban sprawl seems to be one of the main ones. Of course, I'm still learning about this too, but it seems like suburban sprawl threatens farmland because a lot of these cities are on good farmland, and suburbia, I understand. I don't live in cities, but they prefer large lots like 4 hectares or 10 acres. So some urban solutions would be urban farming, decrease food waste, community engagement for green urban development, smart cities, etc. There's a lot of news out there about good things happening. So just need to expand on those and try and decrease those acreages perhaps to permit farmland. Some rural solutions would be conserving wetlands, protecting marginal land, leave a percent for nature. I'll talk about that a little later. That's a really interesting idea. Modify cropping systems to be more diverse. So I'm going to talk about polyculture systems and using wide crop rotations and rotational grazing, but I won't talk about that. That's not really my field. So polyculture and using wide crop rotations. Polyculture is putting more plants in space, and crop rotations are using more different types of crops over time. So here we're looking at space and time and space. Land, from a Baha'i perspective, promotes, from a Baha'i perspective, from promotion of rural and more natural lifestyles, emphasis on moderation always with the Baha'i faith. It's important to maintain land for both food and conservation. Moderation, a key principle in the Baha'i faith. Land holdings in temperate climatic zones will probably be smaller. They are getting awfully large right now. More on that later. Emphasize unity and diversity. Again, crop rotation, polyculture. Baha'i discourse on action. I'll talk a little more about that later. Natural stirrings at the grassroots. And a quote from Baha'u'llah is, the country is the world of the soul and the city is the world of bodies. Sure, this is food waste, I think. Yeah. 1/3 of all food produced is not eaten. Amazing. This occurs along the whole supply chain from field to fork. Reducing food waste reduces hunger by saving food already produced, makes more land and resources available, and cuts global greenhouse gas emissions. We need to measure food waste and set reduction targets. And the next one is interesting. Improve harvest storage technology in the global south. Wet weather and pests, most crop storage requires dry conditions. So we in the north don't realize that there's so much cropping in the global south, but climate change, weather patterns differing, and the fact that living in the tropics is more rainfall and our crops need to be dry is that there's a big problem in the global south, losing a lot of grain, crops, etc. after harvest because of lack of good storage. So there are some good ideas out there. They just need to be implemented. Of course, funding would be necessary as well. Climate change challenges for agriculture. Weather, more variable with increased intensity and frequency. We know that's happening with climate change. Some extreme weather events, floods, droughts, fires, wind, hail. These all stress crops, livestock, the farmer and the farm family, and they can also cause famines. Shrinking glaciers affect rivers and therefore affects irrigation. And we're going to have to expect new pests, maybe not new, but the ones in certain areas of the world that we never had, for example, where I live in Western Canada, are going to come here from the semi-tropics and things like that. So there's going to be a further spread of insects and diseases. There already is, actually. We're dealing with that in Western Canada, and unfortunately, it's occurs around the world. Agriculture's negative effects on climate change, it's definitely, there's problems we need to fix. Global food production causes 34% of greenhouse gases. So this is mostly synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. I'll talk more about those later. Fuel, including food transportation around the world, and some forms of meat production, freshwater eutrophication of lakes, etc., increases greenhouse gases as well, and I'll speak about that more. Meat production, factory farming, livestock, confined animal feeding operations, beef, dairy, chicken, swine. This really has to be dealt with quite severely in the near future. Deforestation for livestock grazing in the Amazon rainforest. It just creates a whole lot of biodiversity loss, and the tropical soil is extremely thin, and clearing this land and grazing it soon leads to total nutrient loss. And the parent material for soil in the tropics is iron, and iron does not allow, it holds so tightly to nutrients that plants can't even grow on that type of a parent material because it's they can't, the iron is stronger than the plant is at pulling nutrients, and so iron always wins. Remediation is very, very difficult, so we've really got to stop chopping this rainforest down, but there are, a lot of social issues involved with that as well. How agriculture mitigates climate change. Diversity cropping systems, crop rotations and polyculture, as I've been saying, regenerative ag and agroforestry. These all reduce pesticide use and synthetic fertilizer use and creates healthier soil. Natural vegetation on marginal land. This is very important. So deep-rooted crops, grasses, forages, etc. They help with more drought resistance and sequester carbon. More on that later. Conserve wetlands are important, so agriculture can contribute to mitigating climate change. and restore marginal land back to nature. Now, this is an interesting statistic here. United Nations Biodiversity Conference 2022 said 30% should be put back. And it seems like a big number, but look how much food we're wasting, as we just noticed. And also, we know that there's a lot of land being used for crops that's marginal. So when we get our act together, we should be able to put a lot more land back to nature. This picture is actually not far from my back door in Alberta here. So very beautiful country where I'm from. And there's a lot of flat land for crop, but there's the beautiful Red Deer River runs through this valley. How agriculture can mitigate climate change, continued end factory farming, and find animal feeding operations. Crop and livestock genetics. We're going to need more resistant crop varieties and heat tolerant livestock breeds. Reduce food transportation. Guess I already said that, but we need to promote local regional food productivity. So almost all our seed crops grown in Western Canada go overseas. So we really ought to look at regional North American. I mean, I think we'll probably need seeds for several more decades around the world when there are climate problems in other places, and we need perhaps buy from others. Promote Indigenous agriculture. This is really important. There are 240 First Nations communities on the Canadian prairies alone, and they're doing some interesting agriculture. And I belong to a group that is facilitating this, and it's quite exciting because they think in systems theory first, and that's the way we need to start thinking as well. This is free range chickens farming versus confined animal feeding operations. So that's what I mean by getting rid of CAFOs on the left. And the chickens on the right even look a lot happier. The ones on the left are happy, but it's only because they're jacked up with hormones and anti-anxieties and things like that. So, I mean, this really has to disappear, this system. Try to buy free run eggs and things like that if you can. Conserve wetlands, not drain them for farmland, habitat for nature, interdependent with agriculture. Wetlands provide a range of ecosystem services. They reduce erosion. They capture excess nitrogen and phosphorus, which is a real problem in high agriculture areas, conventional agriculture. So cattails, for example, capture nitrogen and phosphorus, which prevents lake eutrophication. Carbon storage in these wetlands, wind and flood buffer, and they're nice to look at. They're aesthetics, and they preserve a lot of other species. Prevent eutrophication of lakes. So this is a nutrient buildup, algae growth. I remember studying this way back in university about 30 or 40 years ago. And all the lakes in southern Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba are eutrophic. And that's because of nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizer and pesticide from conventional agriculture. They wash into waterways during rain events. There's snow melts, and they leach through the soil into these water systems. And they cause algae bloom growth and expansion, and it decreases oxygen in the water when the algae decomposes. Reintroduce native vegetation on marginal land. This is actually a beautiful picture. So this is an area, the land looks like it might be rocky. It's definitely undulating. It's probably difficult to farm. And these are the types of areas I'm saying is we need to reintroduce natural vegetation. And of course, livestock like bison, ungulates, and beef. And the thing is, these are deep-rooted grasslands, so they store a lot of carbon. You see on the right are many of these grassland forage types that look at that rooting system, and some of these roots actually are bent back up and then bent back down. So there's 3 to 4 meters of strong rooting system there. And this prairie grassland is a great for carbon storage, and it's actually there's really good, possibly better carbon storage in forests, but carbon storage in prairie grassland is less vulnerable than carbon storage in forests because there's less damage from fire, from drought, or from diseases that forests get. There's virtually no diseases in the mixed prairie. And prairie fires would actually enhance the growth of grass because it's also has undergrowth buildup. So really a great way moving forward of putting marginal land back into grass and putting foragers on there. On the left, there's a diagram that shows the grasses. They have different lengths, they have different spaces, so they really are occupy every part of the soil that's possible. And the one in the middle is interesting because that's our lawns. We water our lawns so much, but the thing about lawns is we cut the grass so much. We cut the top off, and if you cut the top off, you're not going to get a root there. So I don't know. It's there's so much lawn, especially in North America. I say no more. Polyculture and farming systems. Polyculture farming system. Crop diversity reduces pest risk and protects the soil. That's pretty much the size of it. You can really reduce pest risk and protect the soil using crop diversity. I'm just going to take a drink here. The Three Sisters on the left has been our example of polyculture systems for quite some time. This is the system that the First Nations people of North and Central America used and continue to use. So you've got corn, bean, and squash. Many of you have already heard of this, but it's really interesting. I saw it myself and in Honduras a lot. And the bean, corn, and squash is planted together, and the bean climbs up the corn stalk, kind of uses it as a trellis, and the squash has large leaves that grow out at the soil surface, which protects, which actually smothers any weeds that may want to emerge. So it's just a really perfect system for cropping. Carrot, onion, again, I just touched on the surface here. Someone could go into a lot of depth on these. This is used in horticulture. Shade coffee is interesting because I don't know if you buy shade coffee or light sunlight coffee, but try to buy shade coffee if you can, because it's healthier. I don't know if it's healthier, it's better tasting, I think. And it's actually got legume trees. Shade coffee is always grown with legume trees. So the legume trees, the leaves drop to the soil, and the coffee plants take them up, and it's a much more natural system. That's sunlight coffee needs a lot of pesticides because of that extra sunlight and heat. This is a huerto indígena, which is indigenous, means indigenous home garden. This is in the tropical forest. I was very fortunate to work with a First Nations group in Latin America that had every family had 1 or 2 hectares of an indigenous system like this. And the women living quite far back in the mountains, I used to go and visit them, and they teach me all about these farming systems. And some of them had upwards of 165 usable plant species per hectare. So that's 2.5 acres. That's a direct mimicry of the natural rainforest. The natural rainforest in the region where I was working has 200 different plant species. So what they do is they will go into secondary rainforest and preserve the plants that are helpful, and including those that they would only use if they were hunting and gathering. So not just edible plants, but plants for lumber, for housing, for medicinals, etc. And they would leave them and then bring other plants in and plant them in the same planting arrangement that mimics the natural rainforest. So the natural rainforest, of course, in nature works in systems thinking. So this mimics the natural environment. Just a really good system, but actually doesn't make enough money for them as far as exportable crops. So we tried to cut back a little bit using 70 different crops, and then trying to get a few more marketable crops in there. We've got a little bit of disease, but not enough to really cause epidemic proportions. So fascinating. Systems and mechanistic thinking. I've been talking about that a little bit, so why not we define this a little more? This is the tension between the parts and the whole in science. So mechanistic thinking means that the whole is equal to the sum of the parts, and it's also called reductionist thinking. So systems thinking is more that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Other words for this are holistic or ecological. So mechanistic thinking is a worldview that sees reality or nature or social processes as consisting of parts, like a machine. It breaks the complexity of nature apart to examine its workings in its individual parts, then puts the parts together again, assuming the whole is understood. So the whole is equal to the sum of the parts. System thinking is more with the whole, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So it looks at connected wholes rather than separate parts. It sees the world in terms of interrelatedness and interdependence of all phenomena. So it's a whole system. The behavior of complex systems cannot be explained from an analysis of its individual parts. It's better understood as a whole. So I hope that helps understand that a little more. What's it say across the top there, Don? Diversity crops.
Diversify cropping system. Diversity reduces pest risk.
Yes, definitely. Diversity. We've already been talking about that a little bit, but I found this is actually taking place here in Western Canada and the Western United States, or central, I guess, United States, on the Great Plains and the prairies of Canada. Manipulate habitat to incorporate more nature with agriculture. I'm really fascinated with this. The farmers that are doing this, they're planting perennial prairie strips, which grow through fields of crops. So they're native species and they're in plant rows. So looking at these pictures, you can see that the bottom left, for example, is about 3 to 4 meters of prairie. And then you've got, if you look to the top right-hand corner, you see another strip up in the corner. So they plant seed in between, they harvest in between, but they never touch this perennial prairie strip. This creates habitat for beneficial insects, for coyotes, foxes, badgers, hawks, owls, earthworms, etc., that help control pests and build quality soil. So you're not really losing much acreage to crops. In fact, you're gaining in the long run because you're working interdependently with nature, and nature will help you. And nature really, beneficial insects, if you can create more space for them, they will help you immensely. We're just getting our feet wet with more research on beneficial insects. A lot of research going on in Lethbridge. It's not far from me, Lethbridge Research Station. 90% of all field insects are beneficial. So pests, there's really a small number of pests, and so insects, beneficial insects are insects that provide valuable contributions to crop production. They prey on other insect pests. They eat weed seeds, and they help pollinate crops. So lady beetle, one of the most popular, there are 450 different species in North America. They prey on aphids, mites, insect eggs, etc. You see the middle picture down there? That's a lady beetle eating aphids. That's potentially damaging to the crop. The one on the left are 2 carabids. Oh, carabids ground beetle. Carabids ground beetle is means the same thing. These are predators of nearly all insect pests and their eggs, as well as weed seeds. So there they are, 2 of them kind of going to town on a pest there. And on the right, looks like that one's searching for some weed seeds. So this is a huge area, and farmers, even conventional farmers, that they don't like spraying, I'll tell you that much. But they're catching on to this beneficial insect thing, realizing that 99% of all field pests are beneficial, and they just do not want to spray. And some research, more research needs to be done. Some research is showing that a pest will emerge in a wheat field, but before it gets to epidemic proportions, the beneficials work them down about 40 to 50%, eating them back within 2 days. Within 2 days of a pest emerging, the predators emerge. I mean, nature is amazing. So if you spray them, you're going to spray all the weed. You're going to spray all the pests, all the insects. And you're going to prevent reproduction of some of these beneficial insects for next year that could help you next year. So farmers are really keen into this. They don't like spraying insecticides at all because they're the pesticide that's could damage humans the most. So, but permaculture, we could go into so much depth on this. It's contains a lot of diversity. It really uses systems thinking. The whole is greater than sum of the parts, and it's adapted to various ecosystems globally. I mean, it just even looks beautiful with all that diversity in there. And so it's really protects the soil and has, probably has virtually no pests. Abdu'l-Baha says, comparing the various races of humanity with polyculture, consider the flowers of a garden. Though differing in color, kind, form, and shape, yet inasmuch as they are refreshed by the waters of one spring, revived by the breath of one wind, invigorated by the rays of one sun, this diversity increaseth their charm and addeth unto their beauty. So, polyculture, Abdu'l-Baha seems to reinforce it as well. I can't read that across the top, Don. Baha'i social
action, natural stirrings at the grassroots.
Natural stirrings at the grass. Thanks. The natural stirrings at the grassroots. That's a big, big phrase, important phrase in the Baha'i social and economic development. We call it Baha'i social action now. So Baha'i social action reads reality and supports local community-based adaptation strategies. Baha'i social action strives to achieve transformation of individuals, communities, and institutions, all becoming more innovative, adaptable, and resilient. Community temples, we call them Mishriqal Asgars. These community temples and their dependencies will become more widely established. Social action, the Universal Social Justice suggests go and build the dependencies first. The community, the temples can come later. So these dependencies that Abdu'l-Baha has actually delineated for us are the hospital, the hospice, university, food production at the local level. So a lot of people that want to do food production at the local level, permaculture seems to be one of the most popular. So someday, every community in the world will have a house of worship, and permaculture is something better around it. So this is already happening mostly in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, but it's happening, and it's going to hit. I call it a catalytic system. It can get to a point where it really takes off. And agriculture, what's the top there?
Agriculture has been assigned a central role in the renewal of civilization prescribed by Baha'u'llah.
This is the thing, the central figures of the faith. There are plenty and significant statements from the writings of the central figures of the faith for us to realize that carrying forward an ever-advancing global civilization must emphasize the importance of agriculture, rural development, and raising the status of the farmer. Raising the status of the farmer is a very interesting concept. I mean, we know we have to do that. Abdu'l-Baha has stated that a renewed social and economic development process begins at the village level, and that farmers are a particularly important segment of society. The importance of raising the status of the farmer, excuse me, just take a little drink. while sometimes we think of agriculture systems devoid of individuals who own, manage, or work on farms, we need only recall that Abdu'l Baha focused substantially on the importance of farmers. For example, raising the status of the farmer. These are the things that he said. Raise the status of the farmer. The farmer is the first agent in human society. We must begin with the farmer. There we will lay a foundation for system and order. The question of economics must commence with the farmer and then be extended to other classes. Seems like socioeconomic development needs to start with agriculture. Of course, agriculture in cities and town is important too. So in the book, Foundations of World Unity, Abdu'l Baha has there's a chapter in there called Cooperation, and he goes into great detail about what these systems will look like in rural areas on villages and farms. So it's apparent that the key to focus that the key is to focus as much or more on farmers, for example, raising the status of, than focusing entirely on technological inputs, processes, infrastructure, markets, etc. Therefore, social components must also be integrated into the agricultural research and development process. We aren't doing that much, at least not here. Gary could perhaps tell us of other places of the world where we are integrating social components, but that's one reason why I went back to university to get a master's, was to try and get this social component going, but there really isn't much funding for it. It's all technology, but we know in order to succeed, we must work more with farmers and farmers involved in the research process, in brainstorming about what needs to be done. Farmers are systems thinkers. They have to know agronomy. They have to understand machinery. They understand the weather. They market crops. They do all sorts of pest control methods. I mean, they raise a family. They're usually involved in community organizing events. I mean, this is systems thinking at its finest. So monoculture, conventional farming modality, I think I wrote there. Anyways, continuously growing a single crop, this is monoculture, continuously growing a single crop year after year on a given piece of land. For example, wheat, canola, canola, corn. Obviously, I didn't take these examples from Latin America. These are from here in Alberta, Saskatchewan. Using crops from the same plant family can also cause problems. For example, wheat, barley. There are about 3 diseases in each one of these, and there's one that overlaps. So you got to be careful using plants from the same plant family, like wheat and barley are from the grass family or the cereal family. So a little concern there. I can't read what's at the top there, Don.
Crop rotation.
Crop rotation, exactly. So this is this is a planned sequence of different crop types planted in each field from year to year. So after I gave the talk in Atlanta, some people were asking me about crop rotation. So I thought I'd elaborate a little more on it here. Increasing the diversity of a cropping system over the dimension of time, years. So polyculture is increasing crop diversity over space. And this is over time. Crop types are generally from different plant families, as I mentioned before. Plant or pest, like diseases, susceptibility can run in plant families. So you need to leave 2 to 4 years between planting a member of the same plant family. But I'll tell you, the 4 years are places where there's more rainfall. More rainfall creates more humidity around the plants. Therefore, there's more susceptibility to disease. So 2 years is in more drier areas. So leave 2 to 4 years between planting a member of the same plant family. If you have livestock, you have additional crop options with forage crops and mixed grasslands. So it actually makes it a lot more sustainable if you do have livestock and can grow these forages. Benefits of a diversified crop rotation, pest management, really. And also you want to put some legumes in there to get better soil tilth and some nitrogen fixation. But pest management, for example, reduces disease spore load in the soil over time. Reinfection doesn't occur, and the disease spores do decompose if the same plant family is not grown for 2 to 4 years. So diversified, a wide crop rotation. When you're looking at year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, you look at wheat, field pea next year, year 3 canola, barley, lentil. And you go back to wheat, field pea, canola, barley, lentil. So this is a diversified, or in slang we say wide crop rotation. So you've got wheat and barley that are from the same plant family, but there's 2 years in between. You got field pea and lentil that are from the legume family, and you got 2 years in between them. And these are all crops that produce money for farmers. So in a good organic regenerative system, you would have forages in there, legume forages that build soil better and fix more nitrogen for your system. But I'm just talking simply here just to give an idea of crop rotation. So a non-diversified, what we call narrow crop rotation, would be canola, wheat, canola, wheat, canola, wheat, canola, wheat, canola, wheat. This is what we see really common right now. There's only 50% of farmers actually do what number 1, a diversified wide crop rotation. There's 50% farmers in Saskatchewan, and nearly 70% of farmers in Alberta do this canola, wheat. So you can see you're really going to get a load of diseases in there, because the disease from canola, if you just put wheat in between there, the diseases are not going to decompose enough. You grow canola the next time, you're going to get the disease in a big way. So you really have to use a lot of pesticides. And so, but canola is the highest priced commodity we got. So farmers will tend to go that way out of fear. They don't know, you don't know what's going to happen next year, whether you're going to get a crop or not. So again, let's not criticize the farmer, but let's look at the system, which we'll look at a little bit later here. Non-diversified, very narrow crop rotation. Canola, canola, wheat, canola, canola, wheat, canola, canola, wheat. That's just because canola is very high priced. We got a funny saying here that says we live with winter, so sometimes we say canola snow, canola snow, canola snow, but that's just a joke. Anyways, on the left there, you see canola is the yellow flowered crop. So you can see there's a lot of canola out there. I'm trying to find a picture with almost monoculture canola, but I couldn't find one. But you can see that there's going to be some canola probably seeded into that the next year. The one on the right, on the other hand, you've got canola in 3 fields. You know that in this farmer is going to put, a cereal crop or a pulse crop in on that canola, and where there's these cereal crops or pulses growing already in the green areas, are going to be canola there. So you've got diversity over time. I don't like the looks of this summer fallow in the front here, but that's just a fault of the picture of me, I guess, finding the wrong picture. This is I like this picture, and I don't know if the future is going to look like this or not, but just take a look at this. This is an area in Saskatchewan. It's small fields. Again, I don't really like the summer fallow thing where there's just tillage and no crop. It's nice to keep an armor of plants over the soil surface. But look at the trees out there. Look at nature working with farmers. Farms are small. There's a lot of rotation. I could see instead of 3 or 4 crops that we use for rotation, we can actually grow about 15, but we don't have a market for them. We can grow a whole lot of spices like anise and caraway, and we can grow a lot of those, but we don't have a market for them. Canary seed. We grow canary seed, but for canaries to eat, and New York City buys one rail car a year or a day. New York City pet owners have canary seed they eat, and so we do have a bit of a market there, but it's not much, eh? So we tend to go for these global marketable products, but in the future, hopefully, it'll be looking more something like this. I don't know whether it will or not. I just like the picture and the idea and the dreaming. Polyculture's on the left. You can see that there's different species in space. Now on the right, so on the left is probably manual working. It's not probably machinery. On the right is actual machine working. This is conventional farmers that are intercropping. And the crop that's got the bloom on it is flax, and the other one is chickpea. And so chickpea, it's another one of our legumes, like pea and lentils. So monoculture chickpea on the left, that if you go monoculture, even in the dry areas of the Canadian prairies, you have to spray that 3 times a summer with a fungicide. And look at on the right, I've got a diagram of that fungal disease. The spores are blowing very easily from one row to the next. But if you put in flax in between, and there are other reasons why you would want to grow these two crops together. And on the right is the same system, just a little more advanced. So the darker plants are chickpea, and the lighter ones are flax. So what farmers do with this, and it's been researched, but farmers, I know my cousin grows like this, and he sprays zero fungicide. There's no diseases in the one. So even if you just adapt a little bit for intercropping, you use a lot less pesticide. So can someone tell me what kind of a polyculture system this is, please? Anyways, I'm walking down the path in the jungle one day. I came across this scene, and I couldn't help but take a picture. So now I'm using it as a polyculture, which it isn't. It's just a joke. But I don't know whether that old girl's having a good day or a bad day, but I wouldn't really want a chicken landing on me like that either. But anyways, just a little bit of break there. So let's talk about oligopolies. We're coming down the home stretch here to the end. Oligopolies are also called trusts. So market domination and influence. Oligopolies are market domination and influence by a small number of agriculture and food corporations, which is called an oligopoly. They're also called trusts, hence the word antitrust, as in antitrust laws. Since the 1980s, there's been a string of continuous mergers and acquisitions in all agriculture sectors: farm inputs and equipment, commodity trading, food processing, and retail food sales, just everywhere. Presently, a small number of large corporations dominate the agribusiness supply chain. They possess near monopoly influence, which really causes power, and there's collusion, you can bet. And this oligopoly drives the system for short-term profit. So you can see now why those farmers are growing those market-oriented crops and using the close rotations. I mean, these oligopolies, let me go a little further here. It's oligopoly example of crop input companies merging or amalgamation. The most recent big one we had was in 2018, Bayer Crop Science bought Monsanto. So Monsanto and Bayer merged, and this was for a price of $66 billion put out by Bayer to buy Monsanto. Now, Monsanto traditionally had mostly seeds, high-yielding varieties of seeds, including genetically modified seeds. Bayer mostly produced pesticides. Therefore, Bayer now has a very large control of seeds and pesticides in the value chain. So if you look at this, right at the top, it says, what's that say there, Don?
Seed industry structure, 1996 to 2022.
Thank you. So from 1966 to 2022, this has been the mergers. We're left with 4 major corporations: Bayer, BASF, Sinochem, and Corteva. Now the blue bubbles are seed companies, and the brown ones are chemicals. But you look at on the left of Bayer is Monsanto. Monsanto is the one just to the left, and it had all those seed companies. And there's one line between Bayer and Monsanto, and that's that Bayer bought that whole corporation with all those. On the right of Bayer are a whole bunch of lines. That means they bought those companies individually. Bayer is owned by headquarters in Germany. BASF is Germany. Sinochem is big. It's in China. Beijing is its headquarters, and Corteva is American. So what these oligopolies do is they cause social, economic, cultural ruptures to agriculture systems and rural life, and worsening environmental problems because they promote monoculture cropping. They don't favor wide crop rotations or polyculture cropping systems. They favor narrow rotations and large farms. Monocropping is short-term thinking and requires high use of synthetic fertilizer, pesticides, high-yielding variety of seeds, fuel, and large farm equipment. Negative impact on environment. This is, in my opinion, one of our biggest problems and impediments. Corporate field reps are everywhere. They convince farmers to apply products, receiving sales bonuses, and of course, the corporation shareholders earn perpetual economic gain. That's what drives this system. Farmers will plant a crop, nurture it, harvest it, and they net 5 to 15% of annual income. Corporation, banks, etc., obtain 85 to 90% of annual crop income. The system seems backwards, but this is a global phenomenon. When I was farming with my mother and father, I couldn't believe when we did the accounting that we only made 10% of everything that we put out there. There's huge debt. And if you make 15%, that means you had rain that year. If you make 5%, that means you didn't have much rain. You had a poor crop. Sometimes you make 0% and you have to rely on crop insurance to keep the farm afloat. So oligopolies eliminate small farmers. They cause the demise of rural communities. They restrain farmers' control over their profession, promotes accrual of farm debt, environmental degradation, separates rural communities from their original cultures. Corporations are major donors to agriculture research and extension, to local community events, charities, etc., attempting to retain a positive image in the rural communities while controlling the supply chain. So I say don't criticize farmers, but I say it's okay to criticize oligopolies. Demise of rural communities. Farmers buy or rent more and more land to cover rising costs or to have enough land for their offspring. Remember, they only earn 10%, so they're always under a state of fear. Small local farmers expand or get out of the industry altogether. Offspring, as absentee landlords, often rent land to large farmers for top rental price, living in the city, saying, I'm going to make some money off of mom and dad's land. This leads to fewer people in rural communities, services shut down. Improved government policies could help, but it's not happening. Governments seem to give, I think it says, priority to systems like this.
Free rein.
Pardon me?
Governments seem to give free rein of the agriculture system to the oligopoly.
Right, thank you. Oligopoly can dominate a farming region, with farmers obtaining new information about agronomy and farming techniques from the agro-industry sales representatives who have a bias. Farmers become consumers of externally derived production techniques rather than a system based on social or ecological parameters with regards to what people and communities need or what the land requires. They promote a globally based system. It's not regional, it's not community based. This John Deere combine here costs $1.5 million. So it's $1 million for the combine and $500,000 for that header, the part across the front. And this family owns 3 such combines. And if you want to look at the overhead that this family has to deal with, go into rosannafarms.ca. This farm family, this is common. Most of us here in Western Canada are from Western or Eastern Europe. This farm family immigrated from Ukraine to Canada in 1928. Today, this family farms 22,000 acres, which is 34 sections or 34 square miles. They grow 4 commodity crops: canola, lentils, wheat, and durum. And I suggest that wheat and durum do have disease overlap. So really there's only 3 plant families there, which, in a dry area isn't too bad, but that's a humongous amount of land and overhead. Now, Abdul Baha says no more trusts, no more oligopolies will remain in the future. The question of trust will be wiped away entirely. So the future is bright. My question is, will these institutions, I call them institutions, we talk about communities, individuals and institutions in the Baha'i faith and socioeconomic development. So will these institutions modify or transform themselves or be replaced? Or are they going to implode? We don't know. I think Arthur Dahl's on the call here today. Could probably help us out with some ideas here. Now this is from the Baha'i International Community. In order to advance the common good, individuals must possess both the capacity to assess the strengths and weaknesses of existing social structures and the freedom to choose between participating in those structures, working to reform them, or endeavoring to build new ones. So you see in these small Baha'i communities, they're putting up the temple and the dependencies of the temple. They seem to be building new ones. But that doesn't have to always be the case. So what you buy is important. I'm coming up to 55 minutes here, I think. So I just almost finished. Public social license is important. This is you. Public trust. Public pressure. Consumers exert purchasing power, which in turn influences actions by corporations, etc., which eventually conform to public pressure. Examples of consumer concerns are the environment, food safety, animal welfare, well-being of farmers, well-being of workers, but I got this on the brain, well-being of farmers as well. We need to focus on the well-being of the farmer. Free-run eggs versus confined animal feeding operations is a good option if you can afford it. Buying organically produce is important if you can afford it. You can look at the environmental working group online and you can see fruits and vegetables and the different pesticide load. Those that have a lot of load, you buy organically. The dirty dozen, they call them. The clean 15 don't have much pesticide load, and so you can buy them conventionally. So social license from a Baha'i perspective here. This is from the Universal House of Justice letter to the Baha'is of the world in March of 2017. Every choice a Baha'i or a person makes as employee or employer, producer or consumer, borrower or lender, benefactor or beneficiary leaves a trace. And the moral duty to lead a coherent life demands that one's economic decisions be in accordance with lofty ideals, that the purity of one's aims be matched by the purity of one's actions to fulfill those aims. So just to final up here, sustainable agriculture definition, once again, by working with nature rather than against it, farmers avoid impacts that damage the environment without sacrificing productivity or profitability. By prioritizing science that addresses the interconnectedness of environmental, economic, and social factors, we create a truly sustainable agriculture system. So Abdul Baha in the Secret of Divine Civilization says, the world of politics is like the world of man. He is seed at first and then passes by degrees to the condition of embryo and fetus, acquiring a bone structure, being clothed with flesh, taking on his own special form, until at last he reaches the plane where he can befittingly fulfill the words, the most excellent of makers. Just as this is a requirement of creation and is based on the universal wisdom, the political world in the same way cannot instantaneously evolve from the nadir of defectiveness to the zenith of rightness and perfection. Rather, qualified individuals must strive by day and by night, using all those means which will conduce to progress until the government and the people develop along every line from day to day and even moment to moment. That's the end, folks. I'm sorry I went a little bit longer than I wanted to.
That's great. Thanks, Neil. You can stop sharing now if you want to. We can have some discussion here. Great. So if anyone has any comments or questions, any thoughts to share? If you
That
could
was the
raise your, if
best.
you could raise your hand, and that way we can go in order. Yeah, so if you could, does everyone know how to raise their hand on Zoom? Okay. All right, I see Neil.
Yeah, that was the best integration of agricultural knowledge and Baha'i knowledge I've ever heard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Very kind of you to say that.
Bill, did you have something you wanted to say? I can't hear you, Bill. You're muted. Got to unmute. Thanks. You're got to unmute.
Bill Morrison, we can't hear you. Bill Morrison, we can see you talking, but we can't hear you because you're muted. You have to unmute, please.
So if you go down to the left-hand corner, there's a little microphone icon. You can't find it. Maybe you could maybe type it in the chat if you.
I've got it.
Oh, okay.
I've got it.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I thought this was just excellent. I thought it was very, very good. Especially when you start talking about crop rotation and the big business really destroying a lot of things. We really need to find ways to work together better. And I really think that permaculture is really has a lot of solutions, and so does the Native Americans. They have a lot of solutions for a lot of the problems we're having. So we need to work together more.
I
Thank
agree
you
with
very much,
you.
Neil.
You're welcome. Thank you, Bill. Thanks for those ideas.
Sure, that's okay.
Deborah?
Hi, Neil, I really liked, I took notes, copious notes here. I am a gardener, organic gardener, and I'm involved locally in a lot of efforts. We've got some urban farming in the area, but I live in Ohio. When you drive like I live in Cincinnati, when we drive north, it's like you can see all of the land that used to be farms that's now like mega malls and ugly little towns and garbage franchises and stuff. Now there is an interest locally. I'm in several groups. I'm a master gardener, and the city has the zoo actually has a seed bank. Then there's graduates in farming at the local universities and so on. What I'm wondering is, do we know of any Baha'i efforts to educate farmers on these ideas? Or there, I'm not trained in agriculture or anything like that, but I'm wondering if there are discussion groups or anything like that that have risen in maybe rural areas in Canada, maybe the US, I don't know. So educate them about, outside of the corporate sales rep, or do they just wouldn't have time, or maybe in winter or something. I'm just wondering if there's education in rural areas that you know of.
Thank you for the question. There's government specialists called extension specialists that do talk with farmers. I was one of those for about 15 years. But in the province where I live in Alberta, the year of COVID, 2020, they laid off 277 of us because they wanted to get rid of red tape in the government. So we were actually able to offer non-biased information. There are only about 11 of us actually working on the front lines with farmers. So I had hoped they would expand, and I lobbied for that. Let's expand. We need about 30 of us out there, because they're just corporate agronomists everywhere. And so but they promote the monoculture, and I was able, in another talk, I'll talk more about integrated pest management and things like that. That's the kind of thing we can do in conventional agriculture and reduce the amount of pests, just like our understanding of beneficial insects now is so important. So there is government. Saskatchewan has a better system with government, but still vastly outnumbered by the oligopoly. And then the government just lets them go. There's just no, the corporations in many, as I'm sure you've heard, are stronger than many
Oh, yeah.
national governments.
So you're saying that in Canada, there's the extension service, and we have that here too, out of the universities. And I did the Master Gardener training program, which is a semester-long thing. But we were told that we always have to offer information about pesticides, even if we don't
No,
like pesticides. But here, that's sort of the thing. So I'm just wondering, I mean, outside of the extension service, is anybody on here? Is anybody aware of any local Baha'i communities that are involved in environmental issues? I mean, I don't. I don't know Baha'is that are even interested in
In Africa, it's
in
different.
the global south, there is. So Asia, Africa, and Latin America. I worked as one of those in Latin America, in rural
and
development
Ukraine.
and agronomy. So Gary Rouchet has worked, what, 40 some years, 50 years or something.
Yeah, something like that. So I was going to talk about Ukraine, but let's let some of the others that have their hand up first, but I'd like to have a few minutes later. Merv, I think you're first, right?
Okay, thank you. I have a half section of land in Saskatchewan, and I've been going out to the farm, except for the pandemic, every year, like to help work with my renter. And because of the situation I've had there, which I won't get into detail with, but I want to be part of what he's doing on the land. And so with this presentation, I would like to be able to show it to him, but I don't know how I could do that. I would like to see this, maybe even in a pamphlet form or something of that nature, so I can show it to him. We can talk about it and discuss it, and possibly, he can take some steps to do some of the things that are in this presentation. And also, I have a friend who's also rents land, and I'm in close association with him, like we taught school together. And I'd like to be able to present this to him so that he can see what's going on from the Baha'i perspective, because he knows I'm a Baha'i, and I've been trying to teach him the Baha'i faith. So, I want to know, is this possible to be able to have this in some kind of written form, or something you can plug into the computer to show it to him,
Don knows more about this than me, but you can, on this agriculture working group website, I believe this presentation will be posted.
Right, it'll be posted there. And I don't know how you feel about this, but also, I mean, we could just post the slideshow itself, and that way people could, show it to someone. Yeah, I'm not sure how you feel about that. Some people, but those are all, some options to show the video. I don't know if Neil has a script, just in written text of this.
No, I don't.
Yeah. So.
But thanks, Don. I'd be glad to give the talk to any, if any of you people want me to give a talk to your local group. These days I can do it from the comfort of my home office here. So, and there's I'm preparing another PowerPoint, and it's different from this one. It's focusing a lot on the Canadian prairies, and I just had too many slides coming into. I had 90 slides, so I had to divide it in half. So that one Don tells me I'll be able to do it coming down the road for these months in the future. So that might be even a better one, Merv, for you and your farmer.
Okay, thank you.
But you're welcome to join in here. And if you and him want me to do this with you, we could probably do it in a matter of a couple hours and have a good discussion in between some of the slides.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, nice to see you, Merv.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christine?
Yeah, I would like to just address the issue that Deborah raised. I think it's very important that there are unknown many Baha'is in the world, everywhere, we don't know, who do have experience in agriculture, who have knowledge. And then there are many areas in the world where that knowledge is needed. So the challenge is, how do we connect people? And the International Environment Forum has started to make efforts in that regard in two areas. First of all, we are collecting case studies of local projects where people can share their experiences. And then also in our database, we are collecting the information of members where their expertise is and their experiences, so that when someone has a question, we can connect the knowledgeable people. So Neil, for example, if you could also write something up, if you are interested in sharing your knowledge with specific other people, Baha'is somewhere who need advice. If you're interested in providing that service, you could write a paragraph for the newsletter of the International Environment. You could also, I don't know whether you are a member, but if you are, you could put the information into your membership profile, and so we can connect people. There might be other ways of how we can connect people, and maybe you have ideas.
Sorry, what would I join? I missed that right from the beginning. What's the become a member of what?
The International Environment Forum.
Of course.
Okay, it's a Baha'i-inspired organization, for those of you who don't know it.
I go there all the time and read stuff. Yeah, it's always updated. Arthur, you, and various people. It's excellent. Yeah, look that up, folks. IEF. I don't know if I'm a member. I guess I'm not a member. I should become one. Thank you, Christine.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Heather?
Thank you for the presentation, Neil. I was wondering, how can we raise the status of the farmer? What are things we could do?
I got that in my next presentation, but very brief. I know as agronomists, we need to listen more than we talk. I started doing this at the beginning of my career. Try to listen to farmers. When I'm with farmers or farm groups, listen at least 50% of the time, which means talking less than 50% of the time. And I consciously did that, especially with the farmers in Latin America. I think it's a way of empowering them. And I think it was easy there because I didn't know much about their system, their huerto indígena, their home gardens. So I would ask many questions and listen. But we need to be aware that we come from a society that can't stop talking, and we need to stop talking. We need to consciously do this with farmers. And I know sometimes they won't talk either. But we just have to ask questions and get them talking. And I've been with groups up to 6 farmers, 3 farmers, 9 farmers, and they invite me out to speak at the field about something. I have no idea how many times I've done this, it's a lot. And so sometimes they'll want me just to tell them something that's on their mind. And if I know any research results on it or something, but quite often the conversation is fairly open. And in those ones, I try to ask them questions. You know, what's your land like here? What are the crops? What's your history? And it's wonderful when you get 9 farmers and yourself sitting on the stubble and everybody talking equally. And I think that is a part of empowerment. I think empowerment is a big way of encouraging farmers in the future to think on their own. We get the corporate reps that go out there and they're just full of knowledge and they just want to spread it all over them. And you know, this crop is this, you had this last year, next year this, you're going to want to apply this product this fall, and next year, boom, I'll be right available when you plant whatever. So we gotta counter that system. And I think it's part of us transforming ourselves as individuals, communities, and institutions. Whole institutions will be, but you know, even me amongst Baha'is, it's been tough at times because there's, you know, we come from a society that can't stop talking. So I don't know if that helps, Heather, but that's one thing I've done. And again, in a future talk, I'm going to talk about that a little more because I do have a background in adult education, and I studied power quite intensively and how to mitigate power through empowerment.
Thank you. Erin?
Hi, everybody. I just listening to all of this, I am a seeker and new to learning about the Baha'i faith. I'm not sure. So hold on. I'm trying to get my thought together because I am coming from a spot of this is just my natural belief as far as environment's concerned. I think a lot of us have more will be able to do more, and it would create more community. As far as I understand that a lot of this is focused on commercial and big farming, whereas if from what I understand correctly, building more community on a small farm level, whereas to make choices instead of going to the grocery store and buying free range eggs, to connect with your local farmer and buy free range eggs and things to that nature. And that on small scales, we could all environmentally and agriculturally make a difference just in maybe reducing our lawns to native plants, and that will, or paying attention to our own personal little pots of land that we own to restore microbe and topsoil and go about that way, which may parlay into the larger agricultural scale if we can help increase beneficial insects and things to that nature. Because within suburban areas, we've created these vast food deserts, and to be able to increase it on the smaller levels may help on a bigger scale.
I don't have a lot to offer because you explained that extremely well. I think that's a way we need to go. And the Baha'i faith is big on natural stirrings at the grassroots. It came out in October 1983 letter from the Universal House of Justice when the Baha'i faith was going to really start doing Baha'i-inspired social and economic development. Natural stirrings at the grassroots was in that letter, and it's been with those of us that work and try and integrate the writings into our regular job. If we're in development and things like that, I mean, it works with various livelihoods, not just agriculture, but natural stirrings at the grassroots is where it's at. And again, you know, we don't know if these oligopolies are going to modify themselves, but like that one Baha'i writing says, we need to look at our reality, observe our reality, try and understand the social structures there, And if we can't change those social structures, we need to start new ones that are more spiritual and more just, and join with other people in doing that. Not just Baha'is. Baha'is and non-Baha'is work side by side because so many of us have the same ideas and aspirations. So I think you hit the nail on the head in many ways there. Thank you.
You're welcome. One thing I would like to add personally too is I believe that the generation of children that are coming up now, it's imperative that they be taught of natural and environmental awareness, because I think a lot of them are plant blind and environment blind, and they don't have that aptitude. So to be able to get to the younger generations and teach them these processes and teach them the understanding of the natural environment, personally, I believe starting that direction is the new step to get rid of big ag. Because if you can get all these little small farmers going and have that food systems from the kids, because eventually we're all going to age out of farming. But to really like plant the seeds within the children to be able to work forward to get away from the big agriculture. Because personally, my family, I went to school for sustainable agriculture, and then my family from Mexico, Missouri, farmed over 600 acres and all big ag. They've now gotten out of the farming business, but it's like driving through Kansas here in North Carolina, in United States, and it's nothing but cornfield after cornfield after cornfield. And it's, so it's to be able to get these small communities. And I think even like in Victorian gardens and World War II, coming back around that, and people to understand that you can grow all your own food in your yard. It's just the education of being able to do so. So that's my 2 cents. I'm going to try to limit when he knows how long-winded I am. So
Thank you.
No problem. I think we can guarantee that the junior youth are doing that. It's occurring around the world.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we're getting close to time, so we just have time for a few more people. Joe?
You take mine off.
I was thinking about the junior youth group in Columbus, about a mile from where I live in a focus neighborhood. I've been encouraging them to consider volunteering for some of the community gardens, because there's a lot of them in Columbus, Ohio. Well, it turns out they decided to get their own plot at one of the community gardens to help feed their families. And so that to me is proof that the young people are looking at things holistically. And that was pointed out in Neil's talk about thinking holistically. And then in terms of I'll try to be real brief. In terms of the agribusiness stuff, we're dealing with things like corporate personhood and how our economy's motive is being basically run by zombies, legal entities that have the legal, that have First Amendment rights and stuff to undermine community. And so we have to get rid of this night of the living dead in terms of our economics and the greed mongering. But I saw a movie last night, and the last thing that was said in the movie was, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman. And so probably if you're going to transform agriculture, you need to reconnect it to women, because as I understand it, in the earliest cultures, the men went out hunting and the women grew the stuff. So this equality of men and women is probably another factor.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe.
Carl?
Thank you, Neil.
You're welcome.
Inspired in no small part by what Aaron had to say. I am in this game for the sake of my great-grandchildren, so that they can stand on their own feet and live in viable communities. So there's that. There's the importance of I altering the things I do and do not do. In one sense, it's so I have credibility with myself. And what I found is that as I do that, things unfold as I never expected them. I've also noticed that if, in terms of I have a 10 by 20 foot garden plot. Our building has a 16 by 25 plot. And as I've moved in that direction, I found tremendous support from the board and so on. So that as I do things, somehow people around me are responding positively and opening possibilities I couldn't imagine. I think there is a risk, which scripture helps mitigate, a risk of there's some other entity that needs to be different. There's somebody we're kind of against, that we're called upon for what I consider a near impossible task, which is to find, quote, the precious point of unity along the way. So the other thing that I'm watching out for is that whatever I'm doing, I'm carrying with me into conversations, both the scientific knowledge, material aspects, and the spiritual principles that are relevant and underlie that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Very sage remarks. Thanks very much. Gary.
Okay, just a few minutes because I don't want to go too long, but I do want to say that we do have a course that starts in January. Neil, Arthur, Kim, and myself, 4 of us. We do teach agriculture, and we certainly would be very happy to hear and work with all of the people who are in this group, and even hopefully we can find the younger people who would be interested in this kind of an activity. And so just a little bit from my point of view that I'm particularly interested in working on is that, we're talking about agriculture, but I'm just also talking about communities, the communities where agriculture exists. And agriculture often is interactive. It's not just growing food. It's also selling food. It's also preparing things for the future. It's also a place for children to live and to go to school, which is happening on the farm in which I exist here in Ukraine. And these sorts of things are going to be happening in the future, hopefully in a much better sense than we're seeing now, where agriculture is just a huge, large, I think the same thing that Aaron talked about a little bit earlier. These huge, large agricultural facilities in the United States, when I read them from here in Ukraine, I always wonder, what is really going to happen when these things begin to behave in ways that we need to have in the future. So without saying too much on this, I would say we do have the opportunity, in the beginning of next year, January, I think, we do have the opportunity to have another sessions, about agriculture and how we can develop this agriculture in the future. Because when we're looking at the future, one of the things that I can't forget about anytime at all is the benzene or the gasoline requirements here in Europe, and they're taking them away because we can't have them anymore. LPG gas, we're taking them away. These can't happen either. We need to have systems whereby we can live in a different way than we were living earlier. And see, these things are all relevant in the way we develop agriculture. On my land, I have these systems. And so, in around here, other people have the same sort of systems, then we're building them. And sooner or later, we're going to be able to live without needing all of these things. I even think, my personal life is I can live much simpler than a lot of people. They want to have a big house or a big car or a big something. Just give me something small. That's all I need. I think that's the best thing for my life and the future of my life, as we go forward as Baha'is, trying to develop our capacities and our children and our people. So that's enough for me.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. If you're interested, you can download the chat. Lots of information. There was one question, Neil, about the quote. Someone asked about that quote. What's the name of the letter that you mentioned again? Do you remember that? I see someone put it in there. October 20th, 1983 letter of the Universal House of Justice.
Yeah.
Eyes of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. How do I save all that chat?
How do you save it? You go to the bottom of the chat and there are three little dots.
Right,
And you click on those three little dots and it should say at the top, save chat.
right.
You click on it and it'll go on your computer, although I can't tell you where it'll go on your computer. I know where it goes on my computer, but
Got it.
okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Really appreciate you all being here. Wonderful. Thank you, Neil, so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Great to see everybody.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.